And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hi, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook. It is Wednesday, February 7th, and this outlook is for Thursday into Friday. A quick check of the sea ice. We are finding areas of the ice breaking up in the nearshore areas along Bristol and Kuskokwim Bays, up along through the Toland Strait, north side of Nunavik Island, and along areas of the lower Yukon Delta. But still plenty of ice covers much of the northern portion of the Bering Sea, and ice extent reached pretty far south here across a good portion of the upper and middle portions of Cook Inlet after this most recent cold spell. But we are going to see temperatures warming. In fact, daytime temperatures could get back up around or even a bit above freezing as early as this weekend, and especially next week as an overall milder weather pattern returns to areas of southern Alaska, out through the lower Bering and the Gulf. Looking at what we have in the way of weather systems, later tonight, early Thursday morning, kind of a secondary low here along a front in through the Gulf. One of the main lows out here in north central part of the Bering Sea with scattered snow showers around it. And then we have this a little stronger low, bottom out around 964, 965 as it works its way northward during the day on Thursday. And we'll find a trough lingering along the Gulf Coast with this occluded front working north. This will have some winds with it up through areas of the western Gulf, down along the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians. The other low that was up in the northern portion, central northern portion of the Bering Sea will continue to weaken. This will be the dominant feature as we go through Friday afternoon into Friday night. This low will track up toward Bristol Bay and then pull back just off of Kuskokwim Bay and Nunavik Island. The occluded front will push further north and northeastward, bringing precipitation, mainly coastal rains along the Gulf Coast with some mix as you go inland, and then snow where there is colder air further inland and across areas of the southern interior mountains. So looking at the marine forecast on Thursday, expect north winds 15 to 20 knots, inner channels, waves 3-4 feet there in the Panhandle. Otherwise, generally easterly winds, 25 knots, especially Gustavus south, down there south of Sitka with waves 10 feet. East winds 15 to 20 knots outside there of Yakutat Bay to Cape Suckling. For Friday, with that frontal system moving in, we expect winds southeast 25 knots, Ketchikan, Metlakatla. North winds gusting as high as 35 knots there, Stevens Passage, with waves running maybe 4 feet around Petersburg and then off to the North Lynn Canal. North winds 15 knots, 3-foot waves, and we are expecting some gale force winds, southeast to east winds anywhere from 30 to 40 knots, 45 knots actually up there off of Cape Suckling with waves generally 13, 14 feet, but 19 feet there again in the northeast portion there of the Gulf. Across the northwestern Gulf, look for east-northeast winds, 25 knots there outside of Hinchinbrook entrance. Easterly winds to 35-knot gales there at the entrance of Cook Inlet with waves 10, 11 feet. The north upper end there of Cook Inlet, northeast winds 25 knots where there's ice in place. For Friday, winds increase further with that front. We expect 50-knot storm force winds out of the east-southeast outside there of Hinchinbrook entrance, 40-knot easterly winds within Prince William Sound with 10-foot waves. And as we go through upper Cook Inlet, northeast winds to 30 knots there over the ice, but increasing to northeast to east, 40 to 45-knot winds with waves 12 to as high as 18 feet. On Thursday, Kodiak Island will see northeasterly gales 35 to 40 knots there up through Shelikof Strait, and then easterly gales 40 to 45 knots on the North Pacific side of the peninsula, and generally easterly winds 30 to 35 knots from Bristol Bay down to north of Cold Bay. And for Friday, with those winds continuing, we expect south winds on the east side of Kodiak Island to 30 knots, waves as high as 20 feet there. Easterly winds to 30 knots, Shelikof Strait, 10-foot waves. Southwest to west winds 30 knots as we go out the length of the Alaska Peninsula on the North Pacific side with waves 10 to 13 feet or so. Expect southwest to west winds 20 to 25 knots there as you get down through the mid and lower portion of the peninsula on the Bering side. For the Aleutians, well, we have that area of low pressure that's going to be passing just east of Dutch Harbor. So northeast winds there, 30 knots, turning around to the northwest, 20 to 25 knots there back through the central Aleutians. And for Thursday, winds will be generally westerly across the eastern Aleutians at 30 knots with waves 10, 11 feet, either the Bering or North Pacific. And those west to northwest winds continue trailing off there past Adak up towards Shemya. And we expect waves 6, 7 feet there. Across the southwest coast, we still have ice within Bristol Bay and Kuskokwim Bay. Winds northeast out of Bristol Bay, 25 knots. Southeast winds, 25 knots there within Kuskokwim Bay. Along the outer delta here of the Yukon, we expect south winds to 30 knots, but plenty of ice in place here. South-southeast winds 30 knots within Norton Sound. And then on Friday, winds are going to turn around to more of a north-northeast offshore flow, at least here along the southwest coast. Northeast winds to 25 knots out of Bristol Bay and Kuskokwim Bay with ice in place, and then northeast to north winds 20 knots from Norton Sound down along the lower Yukon coast out through Hooper Bay, and north to northwest winds to 25 knots from St. Matthew down to St. Paul. Finally, along the far north, we start the area south of the Bering Strait, east to southeast winds 25 to 30 knots with ice there. Coming up through the lower Chukchi Sea, 25 to 30 knot easterly winds. As we get north of Cape Lisbon, we expect northeast winds 20-25 knots. And then along the Arctic coast, look for east-northeast winds 10 to as high as 20 knots in the vicinity of Utqiagvik. And then on Friday, we expect easterly winds around 20 knots, continuing from Kaktovik through Utqiagvik down through Wainwright. Northeast winds through the lower Chukchi Sea accelerating to 25 knots through the Bering Strait and then turning northerly. On the north side of St. Lawrence Island, expect north winds at 20 to 25 knots.